Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open Observability Talks. I'm your host, Utan Horvitz, and here at Open Observability Talks, we talk about anything DevOps, observability, and open source. So, may the open source be with you. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Logs.io, the cloud-native observability platform, for sponsoring us. Logs.io takes the best-of-breed open source projects such as Prometheus, OpenSearch, Jaeger, and offer them the unified observability platform built for scale. For those joining the live stream now on YouTube or Twitch, feel free to share questions and comments on the chat to make things more interesting for all of us here. And with that, let's move on to today's episode. At KubeCon Europe, just a few months ago, I saw the announcement of Fluent Bit version 2, a major release with lots of new stuff. And later I caught up with Eduardo and heard some cool updates and decided it's way overdue, let's put it this way, to get an update about it and share it with you, with our audience. Eduardo Silva is one of Fluentd's project maintainers and a creator of Fluent Bit, as well as a co-founder of Calyptia, and is perfectly the right person to take us through it. So without further ado, let's get Eduardo. Hey, good morning.
Hey, Duran, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Eduardo?
Doing fine. Thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, pleasure having you. Actually, we had your fellow founder, Anurag Gupta, on the show. I think it was over a year ago, maybe closer to 2 years now. But so much has changed that it's definitely way overdue to sit down again and catch up. So great to have you here on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. And let's start with maybe with Fluentd. The veteran brother and a graduated project of the CNCF, being a CNCF ambassador. It's also a pride that these projects are CNCF projects. It's a graduated project, over 12,000 stars and more than 1,300 forks on GitHub. I checked before the show. So many use it. I know even in my company at Logs.io, we use that. Many users that I encounter and that I work with. So it's definitely highly popular. But for those who are the few that are not familiar with Fluentd, give us the very short background about the project.
Sure. One of the challenges when you start deploying applications, you make sure that your application is kind of working, but then your journey doesn't stop right there. After that, you might want to analyze the data being generated by your applications. Can be your login information, errors, warnings, and sometimes be able to take actions based on this analysis. But if you will go back to 2014-15 with all the hype of distributed systems, Kubernetes, Docker was very popular at that moment, and people start decoupling the applications, right? This information started to go multiple places. Also, before this journey, we got similar problem where we got different, for example, hardware devices like firewalls or applications in Java, applications in PHP or any kind of fancy language. At that time, everybody was generating logs in a different format through a different type of transport. Some of them were used in the network. UDP, like syslog, is pretty common. Other, the file system. And if your final goal is to analyze data, right, that's what you want to do. The next question is how. You might realize, oh, I need to take this data and centralize it in some place so I can run my own queries. And this is a challenge. How do I deal with data from multiple sources, from multiple destinations, and then moving forward at scale, right? And Fluentd was a project that was born in 2011 at Treasure Data at that moment, because they used to have a Hadoop as a service, and they wanted to make sure that customers could ingest data into the platform. As any vendor, right? As much data you ingest, we get a bigger bill at the end of the month, and everybody's happy. But at least from the vendors.
The big data boom. Everyone was doing big data. Hadoop was the hot thing, right?
Yeah. And one of the challenges was how to move all this data that exists in different places, data centers, on-prem, in previous cloud, to a place for analysis. And Fluentd was one of the first open source agents that was around, that was able to talk to different formats, collect data in different ways, but also provide capabilities to process the data before the data hits the final destination. I think that one of the smart decisions that was made on by Sarah, the creator of Fluentd, was like, hey, I'm going to make it with a pluggable architecture. So right now it's for treasure data, but then anybody else can write their own plugins to collect data from different sources or different type of filters or output destinations. Today, there are more than 1,000 plugins for Fluentd available, written by the community. Right. If you go to the GitHub repository of Fluentd, there are not many changes. It's quite small. But if you go to the Ruby Gems website, and you will find the Fluent plugins, gems available. Yeah, it's thousands. And Fluentd solved that problem. And well, the technology was chosen at that time was Ruby. Actually, one of the stories that I just learned recently is like, everybody say, oh, what is written in Ruby? Ruby is not that fast for a system level application service. But actually, Ruby was chosen to write the POC of Fluentd because the final goal was to write it in C++ at that time. But it worked out well. It started working. People started writing plugins, and okay, it continued as it was working out. And then when I joined the company, we got this mission, hey, we need the same solution, but for embedded Linux, because at 2015, everybody was talking about embedded Linux. Your microwave is going to be connected to the internet, will be talking to you.
IoT, everyone wanted IoT everywhere.
IoT, right? And the same problem that you if you abstract from the stuff of deploying applications and getting data out as information of what's happening, will happen with devices too, because devices will purely run software, right? It's like your car. Your car is full of software with sensors, and you can extract that information. And Fluentd was not suitable for that. It was written in Ruby, it's a bit heavy, right? You had to download, I don't know, a couple of dozen of gems to make it work. So I started Fluent Bit. So Fluent Bit was born to solve this problem of IoT at that time. But at the same time, you might recall that Kubernetes was born in 2014. The CNCF was created, and this hype started around distributed systems, Kubernetes. But the same story happens again. You get a new platform, you deploy your applications, and then how do you analyze your data? And Fluentd was the first choice. We donated the project, and with Fluent Bit on it, right? Because they were kind of same family projects. The project got graduated. It was adopted by Red Hat, all major cloud providers like Google, Microsoft, AWS, and well, all companies kind of follow what the stack that bigger cloud providers uses, right? And
I think I shared when you were offline, I shared with the audience, I think one of the most impressive stats that I saw in your presentation back at Observability Day at KubeCon was 6.3 billion downloads back then. I'm sure it's by now even higher than that for Fluentd, from Fluent Bit, right?
Yeah, with all this traction, and well, now all companies move primarily from Fluentd to Fluent Bit because of performance reasons. Fluent Bit, we achieved like a month and a half ago, 8 billion downloads, and we are expecting to hit 10 billions in a couple of weeks. So it's insane, right? It's an insane growth. And we're happy to pivot from this very small market from IoT that, it was a different type of monster to the cloud where this exploded. And yeah, happy that we're solving the problem for, I don't know, thousands of users.
So Fluentd, as far as you're concerned, was more focused on IoT types of use cases, or because I know many people using it for broad, like a classic computing type, but I'm curious about what's your focus as you see it.
Oh, sorry. No, I meant to say that Fluentd was created to work in normal Linux boxes, like in VMs, bare metal machine. Fluent Bit was designed to work on embedded Linux, but then we pivot the project for cloud. We created Kubernetes filter, processors, same as Fluentd. So we started to bring this parity, right, that existed to create data pipelines mostly.
So today, if you depict it today, so before it was very clear to say, okay, you recommended Fluentd for a classic, and this is for IoT. Today, how would you explain these projects, the differentiation, maybe the best fit when new users that might be a bit confused? What would be your guidelines in terms of these two projects?
Yeah, we have a confusion around the marketing of the project and organization, because if you go to GitHub, you will see that the organization is not called Fluentd. Actually, it's Fluent,
Yeah.
right? And Fluentd was the project because, it was the daemon set, and I think that fluent.com was taken. So, hey, let's call the project Fluentd. And then Fluent Bit was born under the Fluent organization, right? So yeah, Fluentd keeps being the parent project. It's what people knows, and Fluent Bit has been always like the small brother in the same family. And yeah, we have some ongoing conversations to not rebrand, rename the projects, but making sure, hey, the organization is Fluent, but not Fluentd, because this generate confusion. And as developers, we always wanted that users has the choice, right? They can decide what type of agent to use for their own problems.
Yeah, but again, when you look at these two projects and you come a new user that just sees the entire ecosystem and landscape of the CNCF is confusing. I had this discussion also here on the show with the CTO of the CNCF, Chris Anacek. But even when you look specifically about the, let's call it the Fluent family, and new users that are not in the nitty-gritty details, but trying to understand, okay, so what would be the right choice for me, for my system, for my use case? What would be your advice, knowing these two projects and being the maintainer of these two projects? What would be your guidelines about choosing the right one of these two?
Yeah, I will talk by using our users' experience. I think that all of them that were long-term Fluentd users, majority of them, including cloud providers today, switched fully to Fluent Bit. And I think one of the problems that you have in the market and infrastructure is like every year you are generating 20 to 30% more data. And one thing that you don't want is that your agent cannot process that data, right? And FluentBit was designed for very constrained environment, but for really high processing capabilities. And that's why Google moved to FluentBit, Amazon and Microsoft, all of them to FluentBit. Even if you go, for example, to GKE, Google Cloud, and you deploy Kubernetes, you will find that FluentBit is running in there, right, on every single agent. And there's an interesting intersection point here, because I get this question a lot, hey, should I use FluentD or FluentBit? And now from a maintainer perspective, I'm saying, yeah, all the innovation pieces are happening in FluentBit, because that's what people is preferring now, right? But FluentD community, people still contribute, create Ruby gems. There's still a lot of usage of that product. It might be around for another 10 years. I don't think that is going away.
Nice, nice. Actually, I am curious. I'm also passionate not just about open source, but also about communities. And the community around Fluentd is actually amazing. And I'm wondering, as one of the people who built out this community, how do you get this way of an active community that is not only consuming the project, but also contributing back, creating plugins, maintaining and evolving the plugins to the extent that you say, hey, even if the core team has switched to FluentBit, the lively community is carrying on with the Fluentd. How do you get to that point of building out this activity in the community?
Yeah, I would say that first a community has been created organically, right? It was not meant to get, we're going to create a community and we did XYZ, it was created. I think that we started in the early days of the project, and the company that was involved at Treasure Data, they were very supportive in open source from day zero. And they told us, hey, whatever we need for the project to succeed, as a side project, there was no business plan around it, right? Hey, if we can go to a conference to talk about the project, engage with the users, that will add more value to the project. And years after that, we started this company called Calyptia, which is the enterprise chapter of Fluent. We take the same approach. Day zero, we're going to hire maintainers. We're going to invest engineering resources on the projects. And I think the community value a lot that we keep connected with them, right? It's like, yeah, we are wearing our business hat, but then we go to the community, We got these community meetings every 2 weeks. We hear about the pains from the users, and always trying to see and think, hey, how we can collaborate, how we can solve this problem that maybe you are not just you facing it, right? There might be, I don't know, 100 companies under the same problem. Because that, I don't know, I think that people behind the Fluent, and maybe having other projects too, we try to innovate, we try to set the pace of how this needs to evolve. It's not about to just ship one software that just works and we just maintain it, but I think that it always can improve over time. And if you ask me why people keeps coming, it's because there's innovation. That's what I would say. But you can ask them, right?
No,
That's
but
my
I'm just
perception.
curious because I see so many young projects that are struggling with building. So they have their own core team, especially projects that arise from vendors. So they have the engineering of that vendor contributing, obviously, but getting a wider circle that will be actively involved is not trivial. And it's amazing to see that around the Fluentd. So I was wondering if you have some tips for the newer projects trying to build out such a
Oh,
successful community.
yeah. I think that we are lucky enough to be in a context of work where there's a lot of pain by moving data. So I think that using Fluent is not optional, right? It's like you have to pick one between Fluent and others, or maybe all of them together, right?
Yeah.
At least from a Fluent philosophy, we try to connect with projects who are competitors, products that are competitors, because that's a way to get more value for the end user. But yeah, if an advice would be a learn about the pain points of the users. It's really easy to get in love with technology, creating a really cool engine. But if that doesn't add a lot of value for the user, they will say, "Oh, it's cool, but maybe I don't need it." Right?
Yeah.
Build
And
something
and
that.
you and you built, you mentioned Calyptia, and Calyptia actually provides like an enterprise edition, right? An enterprise product, or how did you build the commercial offering around it?
Yeah, this is the major question. Well, we are an open source commercial company, COS. Maybe you have heard about the
Yeah.
concept, where Fluent Bit it's in kind of in the DNA of our products, right? And our products, who's the major person who benefit from that is an enterprise. So what we build is like a telemetry pipeline solution that maybe you can solve the same with Fluent Bit by having 5 engineers working 24/7, right? Because maintain data pipelines and to solve the problem for different stakeholders in the company for a long period of time is complex. So our product comes to simplify all this complexity around configuration, data pipelines, how to bring the business logic into the pipeline, because it's not just a move data from A to B, it's also extract the data, process the data, and send the data out. And you will be surprised that all company has very crazy needs around this. For example, you can do very simple processing like add a key, remove a key, but then you have, I don't know, a financial institution that tell you, I'm moving a lot of transactions here, and in the transactions in the records, I have the credit card numbers, but I cannot send that information to my backend because it will be consumed by another team, and there's a kind of policy.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, you can drop this record, this key, and they tell you, oh, but I have a more custom business requirement. It's like, if this is an American Express, I have to do XYZ. If it's a MasterCard, another type of logic. If it's an American Express, a different type of logic, or send the data to a different backend. So when you get to these very enterprise use cases, right, this is where a product helps you to reduce time, right, and solve this problem, because nobody wants to be configuring pipelines the whole day. Your final goal, as I said at the beginning, is to analyze data. And now we find users that with our product, we are able to move certain analytics part that used to be happening in the backend. Sorry, in the final, like for example, Splunk, Elastic, they're moving certain analytics inside the data pipeline so they can have, smarter decision is don't send this data or drop it or send it to a different backend.
Yeah, nice. It's an interesting angle. So you mentioned that most of the innovation that you and the maintainers put these days go to Fluent Bit, the younger brother, the younger sibling of Fluentd. So Let's talk about a bit about, and then I was there, as I mentioned, hearing about Fluent Bit version 2, a major release and everything. So can you tell us in broad strokes about the new features that were introduced to Fluent Bit in the major release?
Yeah, slightly on the major version 1, we started to extend the scope. We used to just do logging, right? But internally, if you look at Fluentd and Fluent Bit, for us, the data is quite of agnostic, right? The data could be whatever we want, right? And we just care about, hey, how to connect certain analytics or telemetry backends in a different way. So what we did was to start extending the support to native metrics payload. So a fixed schema that we have inside Fluent Bit specifically. But also with that, we were able to extend and connect Prometheus backends, receive and send data over remote write, and then we extended to OpenTelemetry metrics. And we have all these conversion layers between one type of schema versus the other, plus the transport pieces. Because when moving data, things can go wrong in many ways, right? Right now, I just got my Wi-Fi. I just might lose my Wi-Fi, right? It's very normal to get a network outage, to get unresponsive backend. And the thing is that how reliable you can be in order to make sure that that data doesn't get lost and it doesn't affect your production environment, and you can still continue operating, right? And there are different approaches for that. But when we extended this scope, we found that also people who were using, for example, I don't know if you heard about the agents fatigue. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation, where people has multiple agents for different things, and people starting to approach us and they tell us, hey, would you be able to implement this, for example, Prometheus not export the feature as a Fluent Bit plugin? And my ask was, why? Is that because you can do collection, you can send the data, you can process the data, and I don't want to manage multiple agents. Oh, that makes sense. So, for example, we took Prometheus not exporter and we did a couple of copy paste from Golang into C code, instant Fluent Bit, and that now is a plugin. And we ship the same metrics, same level, same descriptions. So you can remove one agent, get the same Prometheus experience through Fluent Bit, and continue using your same dashboards. And I think that is a huge value because you also reduce the overhead of the server, right? And people get to know value. This is the same agent, same experience. I don't need to learn something new. It's the same thing that I already have in my environment. That was for metrics, right? The same is happening with OpenTelemetry. It's mostly used for traces. I would say, yeah, metrics are there right now. Logs is market stable, but I just knew a few people who are using OpenTelemetry logs today. So I would say that might need more feedback, but at least from the Fluent Bit side, we extended the scope to support all the payloads from OpenTelemetry. And the innovation piece comes here is not just we're going to extend to support multiple telemetry data types. It's about, hey, our users doesn't have a single type of environment where just does logs. They also do metrics, they does traces, and they have Prometheus, and they are using OpenTelemetry in the other endpoint, and they are using different things.
Yeah.
And they struggle to connect the things, and it's really hard. And by experience, since the early days of Fluentd, you will never find in production just one single tool that does everything. Actually, what you find most of the values with tools that can integrate, right, extract value, but without being a drop-in replacement, because drop-in replacement takes time. And yeah, well, innovation piece, there's a lot of work doing, but I think that the biggest one for 2.0 was the formal logs, metrics, and traces story.
Yeah, and that's very much aligned with what I see also in the industry across the board. So with the Fluent Bit, you did that, and Telegraph moved from metrics the other way, from metrics to extend to logs and traces. And you saw what Elastic did with unifying all the bits into one agent. And so it's definitely the trend across the board. Not to mention OpenTelemetry that you mentioned, that from day one decided to tackle the three three telemetry types and even beyond, and look at it as a unified approach. So it's definitely interesting to hear the support for time series data that you have built into Fluent Bit, and especially the support for exporting it as for ingesting, a Prometheus format, because I think this is today, especially in the cloud native world, the de facto standard. So it's definitely something that will enable many of the users to use Fluent Bit also in the metrics side of the house. By the way, any other updates that you wanted to share with the audience?
Oh, sure, yeah. And well, right now this year we will be just fully on Fluent Bit version 2 and iterating, extending more connectors. For example, the enterprise is asking for these connectors like Google Chronicle. It's like a special service for security things. We just shipped that one. We are doing a lot of work in the Windows area, right? People always laugh at Windows, but if you go, we talked to a couple of banks once in a while, and they have 100,000 deployments with Windows running Fluent Bit today, right? And they primarily did it for collecting logs. And now everybody, hey, can it collect also the metrics from Windows servers? Yeah, so with the same thing that we did for Linux, we did it for Windows. So we now can collect native metrics from Windows. And well, we're solving that problem at a very high scale. Yeah, Windows is not a pleasant operating system to work with, to be really honest. But yeah, we got thousands of users. A lot of them had this problem. Hey, it's something that we have to tackle. Somebody has to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we are in a really strong position to do it, and happy to support all of that. I'm not a Windows developer, right? There's other people from the community who contributes all these pieces. And in traces, well, we didn't talk about traces. Yeah, if you support OpenTelemetry protocol, you have to support traces. I think that at the moment we don't have all the processing parts for traces, but that we will start extending based on demand. So maybe we can process metric, we can process logs, but for traces, it's just we can do selection, but maybe just send them out. Yeah, if you want to have more strong experience with traces, where you can want to do tailing, something like that.
Yeah, tail-based sampling, or usually these are the typical things that you get in the ingestion part of the traces.
Yeah, today you can use the OpenTelemetry collector, right? You can centralize all your traces in there. Yeah. But at least for everything else, whether it's logs and metric, I think that Fluent Bit has been working really great. We get really good feedback. Yeah, it's really exciting to get achieving 10 billion downloads from Docker Hub, from containers, but also that means more bugs, more community that needs more support, right? It becomes a tough job from a maintenance perspective, because every line that you write, I'm not talking just by me, I'm talking about most of the maintainers that writes times more code than I'm writing today. And yeah, this will go to production. It will be deployed 100,000 nodes, and make sure that you don't break anything, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. And by the way, what you said about Windows, that's a known problem, I think. Actually, just a week or two ago, my team released a few fixes for OpenTelemetry on the Windows side, because let's face it, most of the maintainers on OpenTelemetry are not Windows people. And even bare things like you only get the packaging as a tarball, and Windows users like zip still. So even getting the ability to have a zip version of that is something that wasn't there, and we added that a couple of weeks ago. And things that were some other things that didn't work well in the Windows version when you ran it as a service, because I guess whoever did the testing just ran it locally, but not as a service, and things get messed up when it's a service format. So Windows always gets less attended in these ones, but very important, and someone needs to pick up also there. So that's a known issue, definitely. And you mentioned the rich suite of plugins. I'm just wondering, with Fluentd, you talked about it before. Lots of contributions from the community, the Ruby gems that you mentioned. Can you tell us a bit about the community behind the plugins? How much is the core team, and how much is it active community contributions around that?
Yeah, sure. Fluent Bit has a different plugin mechanism than Fluentd. Fluentd, well, based on Ruby, was kind of a small core, and you pull the gems, so they become plugins for Fluentd and extensions. In Fluent Bit, when the project born, personally, I took the opposite approach, because it's like, okay, this sounds too heavy. I found that people is struggling to build a bundle or something that works for them. Hey, let's build all the plugins inside the agent, right? Kind of a Golang binary where you have everything the same thing. But hey, we are in C, so there's some some challenges. So what we did was kind of write almost everything by hand and from scratch. HTTP clients, OAuth2 mechanisms, security. Well, we use OpenSSL, of course. We're not going to do reinvent crypto libraries. And I think that from that perspective, and the way to build plugins in Fluent Bit today, even in C, is really simple, because the API abstracts a lot of the complexity of networking, failures, TLS handshakes, events-based mechanisms. All of that works behind the scenes. We have a really cool architecture with threads, coroutines, and it works great. But when people want to extend beyond that and they don't know C, for example, one of the first pain for them was, hey, I need to create more filters for my own use case, like I explained you with this credit card. That's why Lua was born. The Lua filter was born, so you can write your own modification script that goes into a configuration and just works. And now we get to a different point in the project where people have seen configuration with 40 filters chained together. It's insane. And it was like, okay, this is wrong. it should, this will become the next bottleneck. And what we did in Fluent Bit 2.0, we implemented this concept of processors, right? What is different that in previous versions, like normally from a high level, you have input filters and outputs, period. Now, inputs and output plugins can run in separate threads. So they can consume other CPUs, right? Or CPU cores. But all the main event loop that orchestrate everything plus filters works in the main thread. If you have more filters, you get more. That will become your next bottleneck if you extend too much. So what we did was to implement the concept of processors that runs together with the input plugins or the output plugins in a very agnostic API. You can reuse the same filters, but they can run in separate threads. So now you can scale up by moving that workload processing to different CPU cores and different threads. And processor has been really good. You can reuse, for example, the Lua filter in processor mode. And processor, the difference with filters is like they don't go through a routing mechanism. So they just run from top to bottom in the configuration. And those are just supported in the new YAML schema configuration format that we have. Fluent Bit used to have what we call a classic configuration mode, and now we just pushing also a parity with YAML. I think that has been really successful for people in the cloud native space, because all the tooling plays well with YAML. There's no beautiful config format, right? Fluentd is XML. We invent our own format with Fluent Bit, but I think that we're going to default to YAML shortly.
Everyone is a YAML engineer these days, so
yeah.
But what you said about the making it parallel processing, the multi-core, that sounds definitely like something that would give a superior performance. That sounds exciting. And you mentioned before the thing about Kubernetes. I think you did some interesting things around Kubernetes events, right?
Oh yeah, there's so many news. Sorry about that. Talking about, you mentioned performance. I always make this analogy that when people talk about performance, people think about how fast this car can go, right? But people who has more experience think about how fast this car can go, plus how much gas I need for that, right? And in computing is the same, right? You can have a very, really fast tool or agent, but also how much power you need to process that. Oh yeah, I need 5 servers. That's wrong. and talking about the private product around, and at least with Fluent Bit, we make sure that we can have a very high throughput, so use the resources that we have in a very smart way that can give us more processing power in less time, but even using less CPU, that with different type of architectures. And now going back, this is from the performance perspective. So in the second point was the
So you talked about the performance, that's one, but secondly about Kubernetes, you had the events plugin,
Kubernetes.
right? To pull
Yeah,
Kubernetes events into the system.
yeah. Sorry about that. So like that. So I think that from year 2018, we support the Kubernetes filter inside Fluent Bit. That means that when we collect the logs, we can enrich the logs with labels and annotations. And now recently we get this need like, hey, my Kubernetes cluster generate events that also I need to analyze for security purposes or general analysis. So we just ship a new plugin that also is called Kubernetes events in the input side that just connects to the API server and is able to retrieve all the events by default, or you can select certain namespaces and ship them as normal logs over the pipeline. And yeah, we're getting a ton of good feedback about that. I think that is becoming the next default if you are an agent in Kubernetes. So happy that we were able to ship that really quickly. I think that the plugin was created in less than 1 week or so.
Oh wow, that's impressive. So most of the plugins, just to understand the architecture, are these done by the core team, or is that something that the external contributors can write plugins, just to understand the dynamics and how it's different or same as Fluentd in terms of the activity of the community in generating plugins?
Oh yeah, it's different case by case. For example, Google maintains their own Stackdriver plugin. For example, the Stackdriver teams contributes and have engineers working on Stackdriver plugin inside Fluent Bit, which is part of the core. So they just work directly on upstream. For example, we have the Datadog plugin that was contributed by Datadog, and different companies contribute to their own connector that either was missing or we just created, and they saw a ton of value because, hey, if we have thousands of users using this agent, we might have a connector. I think Nightfall is another company. I think Splunk contributed some time to their own Splunk connector. And yeah, it's fun because so the fun part here is like people contribute by need, right? They need to solve a problem or they need to solve a business problem, and they find a good value by investing time and hours in Fluent Bit. I think we don't have like since this is a project based in C language, we don't have 1,000 contributors in the code. I think that we are a bit over 300 in total. But now, yeah, because most of the people solve the problem with processing with Lua. Now, well, with version 2 and also a couple of months ago, we improved the WASM interface. So you also can create plugins in WASM for the input or filters. So if you're using the WASM layer, you can use Python, you can use Rust or anything, or any other fancy language that you like.
Go, I think you also added, right?
Go in the output plugin. Yeah, we shipped that a
Yeah.
while ago in 2019, I think. It was a very experimental thing, but yeah, it worked out well.
Nice. And I think you're planning on announcing. We're now at August, and in a couple of months' time, we're going to have KubeCon North America. I think the big announcement is going to be around version 2.2, if I'm not mistaken. Do you want to tell us give us a teaser about what's up and coming?
Yeah, well, I don't want to do spoilers here, but okay, 2.2 it's coming for KubeCon. That will be maybe end of October. The release will be ready. One of the pain points that we found with the community was around monitoring of the agent, right? So at any kind of project where you get the problems at different layers, right? We used to have a connectivity, functionality, and now are more around usability or how to make easier to create these pipelines. So one of them, it's about the monitoring of the agent. We're shipping a new endpoint with new Grafana dashboard so people can get more insights. We are preparing another secret project, which is a terminal UI-based project for Fluent Bit, right? That you can monitor, you can scrape this stuff and get some charts in your terminal. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm gonna share some information around October. It's looking pretty cool. And the other is around, well, performance improvements. And I always mention this, and people will say, oh, why you're talking always about performance? Because there's more demand, right? There's always more demand. If you're now able to process, I don't know, 100,000 messages per second, now we need 120. Okay, what's the next bottleneck? How we can improve it? How we can adjust the architecture? So performance will always there. We are now working closely now with a person who's writing a Fluent Bit book. It doesn't start from us. It started from Phil Wilkins, who created the Fluentd book. He started creating now the Fluent Bit book. So, and we say, we should work together. At least as maintainers, we're going to contribute in the revision edition of the book. Because one thing that we notice with technical books, it happened to one person that I know that wrote the Kubernetes on the Edge book. The problem is that he shipped the book after writing a book. Disclaimer takes 12 months, if not more. The moment that you ship the book, maybe some of commands or configuration that used to be supported at that time are not longer available, or they're deprecated. This happened to him, right? Chapter 1 and 2 is broken because they deprecated a bunch of things in K3s. So, and it's all Phil, I don't want that this happened to you. So we want to make sure that whatever we ship in the next version, either Fluent Bit 3, we were thinking at that time, or 2.2, will be working for your version. And if we're moving to YAML, if we're moving to more collection of metrics and, I don't know, OpenTelemetry payloads type, let's make sure that you have the right support from us, because, this is kind of new, has been there for more than 1 year, but I want to make sure that your readers and people who use Fluent Bit and consume this book can get a good experience. Now, Windows improvements are coming more and more. We keep shipping more metrics for Windows. I would say that there's no like a really big new future, right? Because there's a lot of things to tackle, even still in logs, in metrics, in traces, in processing. YAML will improve too, right? The way that we support YAML today works. It's fine. But I think we need to do some improvements for the tooling who just does a YAML strict mode, which is more, you have to use lowercase, uppercase, right? We just use underscore like in the old way, the classic mode. We need to fix that. And we will have more news around traces too, how to select traces, and how to not to correlate all of them, and not to correlate all the metrics, all the data type, the telemetry data types when they go through the pipeline, because that is aggregation. But we're doing some selection through processors. So certain traces that are not useful, you can discard them right away. You can run the Lua filters on top of them. I think that part is really interesting. One of the challenges that we found with people doing traces, and maybe you can elaborate on that, you have more experience than me on that, is like, I'm receiving all the traces in my collector, for example. But I don't need all that data, and the collector also is processing so much data that maybe we can discard them, right, from the edge, right, where the SDK is sending this information. There's a bunch of architectural solutions, right? Put the collector on the edge node, but they're telling me, hey, we have Fluent Bit already. Can you do something with this? And then ship from here to the collector, or any type of backend that support the same protocol. So there's a lot of experimentation and news around connecting all these type of use cases. Plus, we're working hard with the community to create trainings. And right now we are running, for example, the new Fluent Bit webinar series, summer series, that are being out. We have one today. I think it's running at this same time.
Nice.
I think it's today or tomorrow.
I think tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. But I saw
tomorrow.
someone posting on that.
Anurag and Thiago is running that one. So please, community, it will be really good if you can join. And so I think performance, YAML, Windows processors for traces, more processor for matrix. So a lot of things that are being really useful for people. And we're preparing for Fluent Bit version 3 also, which is the next year. We plan to launch it on Paris in KubeCon 2024.
Exciting. Great. So definitely for our audience, check out the Fluent Bit team at Open Observability Day, the pre-KubeCon event that week, and then obviously at KubeCon itself. in Chicago in November. And until then, do you want to share with the audience where they can reach out? I know that there's a very active Fluent Slack, but do you want to share where to find you, where to reach out to the community?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of channels. Asynchronous communication, Slack is always good. If you go to Fluentd or Fluent Bit website, you will get the Slack link. It's Fluent-all, but yeah, you get a shortcut in there. The other is at Twitter for more random communication. Actually, sometimes we get asked for help in Twitter. GitHub is also another resource, but we have the Fluent Bit community meetings happening every 2 weeks, right? That have been very useful. So people from different companies join us, they share about their use cases, and we are there to just try to help as much as we can with suggestion or listening about struggles that they might have with Fluentd or Fluent Bit, and try to see how we can, at least for people who are from different companies in that call, we can prioritize in our roadmaps.
Nice. What time zone is are the meetings taking place?
Oh, we run in both time zones. I can share that
Nice.
maybe after the call, so you can post it on.
Yeah, we'll definitely share the reference to the community, and I think the community calls for any project are amazing. So if you are getting into that, that's a good place to hear and to actually share also your pain. Highly recommended. And for you, where can they find you and reach out to you?
Yeah. So before how to reach out to me, one big ask: we are running the Fluent Bit survey this year, right? One of the challenges that we have, another challenge we have is like we have a ton of users, right? And we get a huge community, but sometimes it's hard to understand where the struggle are or how we can do a better job for them, for the community. So we're running this survey that is published in the Fluent Bit and Fluentd website. So if you go to the main sites, you will find a banner, click here. It's a survey, it's totally community-based. The CNCF is helping us to promote the survey too. So if you are listening to this recording, please help us with your information around your use case. Now, how to reach out to me? Twitter, GitHub, Cyper, Eduardo Silva Pereira is my handle on all the social media, or just send me a direct message. I still open, and every day I receive some weird message, but I will keep it open because some people have been have been reaching out for help, for assistance. It has been a really good channel for that. And if you want to follow the Calyptia handle too, happy to promote that, and we can help from another angle.
That's great. That's great. And thank you very much. And do stay with me for the last part of the show, which is, as always, the breaking news. And today, I have quite a few updates that I wanted to share with the community. First of all, is Prometheus that now supports OTLP. Recent enhancement enables Prometheus to ingest OpenTelemetry metrics using a new OTLP compatible ingestion endpoint. The pull request of this feature has just been merged end of last week, so it's really fresh and will be available as part of the next release of Prometheus. Obviously, it's still experimental, so it's under a feature flag, so be aware of that. But if you want to hear more about that, I'm posting on the comments here for the live stream audience, and I will also post for the listeners on the podcast apps a short brief on that. Which is also very similar to what you said. You recognizing that Prometheus is a de facto way of processing, but on the other hand, OTLP, OpenTelemetry, and OTLP as the protocol is becoming more and more common, and people are expecting to be able to ship that and be able to ingest that from the other end. So definitely aligned with what you shared with us as well. And then we're talking about Prometheus. PromCon will take place in Berlin this year. The dates have been published. It's the end of September, 28th and 29th. It will be the 8th annual conference of Prometheus and all the open source ecosystem around it. So Cortex, Thanos, and so on. It's a good place to hear use cases, case studies, best practices, new features and integrations and so on. Also the integration with OpenTelemetry I just mentioned. So Do check it out if you're into the Prometheus ecosystem. And by the way, there's also an open call for proposals. So if you are also knowledgeable in some respect, want to share some of your experience with Prometheus, there's also a good chance still to submit your proposal there. Posting it here also for the live stream audience. Are you going to be at PromCon by any chance, Eduardo?
I would love to. I think it will be hard in September to. I live here in Costa Rica, move to Berlin for that date, but I don't say no, but I would love to. I think that will be good.
Nice. We talked about OpenTelemetry before, so OpenTelemetry also some major news, at least for those who are in the core of OpenTelemetry. OpenTelemetry Semantic Conventions is now officially separated from the specifications as of the last release. So if you followed the release, version 0.21.0 is already a separate semantic conventions. And the reason it's important, it might sounds like a minor thing, but the reason it's important is that we've all been waiting to get the specification over the maturity finish line and announcing the specification as stable and generally available, GA, but it always got delayed because of the semantic conventions, and especially now that Elastic Common Schema is going to merge into OpenTelemetry. So we're going to get all the goodness from the Elasticsearch community and the Elk Stack community and the knowledge about log semantic conventions into the OpenTelemetry. Now that it's separate, we can get the maturity of the specification while still carrying on with the semantic convention. So this is definitely an interesting one to check out. I actually posted about it just today, so it's really fresh, hot off the press. Eduardo, what do you think about the motion to standardize on a specification and semantic conventions for how a log should look like, how metrics should look like, and so on, especially logs that you've been around logging for so long?
Yeah, I have mixed opinions about it in general, not because and not from the angle of it's good or bad. It's like from years ago, there's always looking for to have these standards in general, and we always get some struggles, right? And we always ended up with different heterogeneous systems that speaks in different languages, right? And what I'm all about is about to support every single standard, every single schema that exists around, because from my angle, it's not to create a standard, but be able to connect this different standard, these different schemas, and always thinking in the user that if they are using XYZ, tomorrow they can switch vendor, they can switch protocols, and things will run smoothly. So I'm really happy to see this also in the Fluent community. We have, again, a lot of these requests for Elastic Common Schema and other schemas. This is part of the news for the next release that we're doing in October. We're having some layers around that too. But as far as we are adding value to the user, I think that I'm all in. I don't want to say just I believe this is a huge standard. This will fix everything, because time sometimes demonstrate that it's not one thing that helps; it's multiple of them. But happy to learn more about it, and talk to the community, because one thing, as even us, right, releasing software, pitching, this is what you should use. When you go talk to the users, sometimes the experience is different, and I would love to get that feedback to see how we can help them, and all maintainers, of course.
Yeah, sounds good. Another update on the latest release of Kubernetes 1.1.27. On the observability side, there's a very important feature. There's now, it introduced a new feature called Node Log Query that allows viewing logs of the services running on the node. So you can actually use the kubelet API to just query and understand the logs. This is still alpha release of the feature and is behind the feature gate, obviously. But the nice thing, you just run it with kubectl as you would any command, and you can also use filters to compose more complex queries. So I think this is something that has been long overdue for Kubernetes users to be able to natively query and understand and get the logs from their workloads essentially running Kubernetes. Again, sharing here with the live stream audience, and we'll share that also on the podcast show notes. And last thing, before we run out of time, very interesting project that was shared, project called Kelemetry, Kelemetry. It's essentially a project for global tracing for Kubernetes control plane. And we all know it's Kubernetes is async, it's event-driven, it's declarative. So it's interesting in the context of tracing, because the typical tracing approach, where the spans are the operations ordered by which operation invoked which, doesn't really fit well this model. So it was fascinating to see that Kelemetry took a different approach, maybe a bit similar to Kspan, for those who are familiar with this open source, where a span is created for actually not for the operation, but for the Kubernetes object itself, and each event that happens on that object is a child span, and Kelemetry collects the data from the API server, the audit logs, and uses that. So it's a very interesting project. I'm sharing here an interesting blog post that was posted on the CNCF blog. Have you run into that one by any chance, Eduardo?
I don't follow the Kubernetes news like in every single release, but I always try to come up with what is new in the observability space. Yeah. But for example, this kubelet thing is really interesting, right? For example, in the past, everybody used to saturate the API server to grab, the metadata. But for example, the kubelet has the same information, was never exposed, and Amazon was doing some work in Fluent with Fluent Bit on that area, where now you can extract metadata, but from the kubelet and not saturate the API server. So as much power we give to kubelet, I'm happy to learn about that. So I would like to explore what we can do with it too.
Amazing. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank you again for joining me and for joining us and sharing all the latest and greatest with Fluentd and Fluentd, and can't wait to hear the announcements around the KubeCon. You also had a very good developer week, right? A week ago or so, right? So the community has also got FaceTime together.
Yeah, we were in Houston like a couple of weeks ago. So we had a private meeting with some developers from different companies. So it was a really good experience to understand pains, what we can solve, challenges, and be more work on opening this type of instances as a roadmap. So
it's good to have more FaceTime, not just KubeCon and other. We need more of this FaceTime, with all due respect to the virtual meetings and the async channels. But anyway, so thanks a lot for joining me on this on this show, Eduardo.
No, thank you for having me, and I'm happy to join anytime that you want.
Thank you, and thank you to all the listeners and audience joining us here on the live stream or on the show. And all the episodes, as always, are available on your favorite podcast apps or on YouTube. So do check it out. And if you are listening to this episode on the podcast apps, then do know that we stream the episodes live on Twitch and YouTube Live. So you can find all the details on the Twitter handle @OpenObserve, where you can hear when we're live streaming, and to also share your comments, suggestions, news bits, if there's anything interesting that you want me to include. And with that, I'd like to thank you everyone for listening. I'm Dotan Horvitz, and see you at next month's episode.